Hello, everyone. I'm Kamraun.
And I'm Billy. Welcome to the HorseFrog Podcast, home of your two favorite professional digressors.
Today, we will be discussing Book 3, Chapter 18 of Memories of Ice, a novel in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. This is part 4 of our coverage of this chapter.
Now, this podcast series is intended to be a companion to reading or listening to the books set in the Malazan universe. It's not a book review, and it's most definitely not a replacement to reading the books. Both Kamraun and I know that this series is just the best fantasy story ever written, and we're approaching this from a purely fanboy point of view. There'll be no critique, at least of this series. Other series, for sure.
We'll be covering the events of the books in a linear fashion. There will be spoilers for those that haven't read the books. We'll try not to spoil anything prior to us covering that portion of the respective book.
Quick warning, today's episode contains descriptions of topics maybe not suitable for youngsters, so please keep that in mind.
Definitely not suitable for youngsters. Our show's listener supported. If you'd like to support us, we'd really appreciate it. You can do so by visiting our Patreon link on our website at horsefrogproductions.com. Currently, we're posting ad-free episodes on Patreon weekly.
Also, we would really like to hear from you, and we really do mean that. So send any feedback or comments that you have to contact@horsefrogproductions.com.
We received a comment from Gruntle in Indiana. He said, I don't know if you guys appreciated the magnitude of insight into Animander Rake and Brood. Both are immensely powerful, yet recoil at the notion of exercising their power to dominate. Why? Because they comprehend the vastness of the attendant responsibility it entails. Thus they would rather the Empire impose order. Both serve to restore balance when there is overreach. Contrast this with Kalor the Fool, who has learned nothing. I was thinking about this a little bit. The way I look at it, Kalor thinks he's above everybody else. And probably also thinks he's superior in every way. So in that regard, he thinks, yeah, I should be in charge. These people are idiots. I know what's best for everybody.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether that involves killing everybody to spite somebody else. While Rake and Brood, I don't know that they want to be in charge. But they are, because based off the personalities that I've seen, they are the people that should be leading in their respective areas. And they seem to care about those that they are leading.
Yeah.
When it comes to having to impose order on a continent or something like that, it's going to be a big drain on time and energy. And Brood and Rake are already saddled with enough. I don't know that they want to take that on.
Yeah. Being an occupier of any sort is costly. And being a dominator in particular, you've got to always be kind of like keeping the iron fist. That's a lot of work, man. And who's to say that they haven't been in the past, though? I'm assuming Rake has never been and Brood has never been because they seem to be pretty upstanding fellers. We don't know that they haven't given their hand to go, and they might be seen as tyrants from other points of history and other aspects at certain points of their history, too.
Yeah. If Rake was in charge of... We're going to get to that. If Rake was in charge of an empire, when he passes judgment... The way he passes judgment when necessary, that's not going to fly. That's like an authoritarian, severe...
No funny business.
Yeah, there's no funny business.
Remember the Bascus. There's no funny business. There's no funny business.
You steal something, get your hand cut off, that type of severity. You know, it's a really serious punishment.
Yeah.
I think he's fair, but...
Yes.
For the Malazan Empire, by contrast, I mean, that method of punishment is way beyond what the Malazans do. I mean, the worst thing they're going to do is kill you, or I guess torture you, then kill you.
It's an interesting thought, though.
Yeah, thanks for reaching out.
Yeah.
We appreciate Gruntle. That's almost something that you'd have to spend 30 minutes unpacking on its own. Yeah. Talking about the various aspects of that.
Yeah, I agree. And sometimes that kind of stuff gets a little above my reach and above my pay grade to think anyhow.
I think you don't give yourself enough credit, sir. We also had a homework assignment to look up how many souls were bound together in Quick Ben to see if there was a correlation with the 12 warrens that he commands. I went back and looked. That was actually that flashback earlier in this book when Whiskey Jack told Rake how Quick Ben came to be who he is today.
Right.
And 11 mages fled on foot into the holy desert Raraku.
Yeah.
So he commands 11 mages. I guess we've seen other mages that can command multiples already, so maybe if any of them could command more than one or two, then he inherited that as well.
I'm like you. I think the multiple mages out there can probably access multiple warrens, but can they do them like, here's my 6, and then I'm going to blast you with another 6 and still have a little bit left to get me out of here? It's like, so they're like power reserves in a way for him in an unusual way. Or does it work that way for everybody?
Well, he does seem to be a connoisseur of the art.
Yes.
Weaving them together, overlaying them the way it's described. That is just somebody that is a nerd about the subject. You could tell by the way he was talking to Boshelane. He's interested in learning more about this still.
Yes.
He just has this insatiable appetite about knowledge in regards to this stuff. So I think he just loves it.
Yeah, he does. His lust for knowledge, let's just call it that, is insatiable.
All right, Chapter 18, Part 4. Shrouded once more in shadow, Quickben made his way down the rubble-littered street. Most of the fires had either died down or been extinguished, and not one of the remaining structures showed any light behind shutters or from gaping windows. The stars commanded the night sky, though darkness ruled the city. Talamandus whispered, "Damn eerie." Quickben softly grunted. He said, "That's rich, coming from someone who spent generations in an urn in the middle of a barrow." That's true.
That's what it is. Very true.
Talamandus said, "Wanderers like you have no appreciation of familiarity." The dark mass of the thrall blotted the skyline directly ahead. Faint torchlight from the square before the main gate cast the structure's angled stones in dulled relief. As they entered an avenue that led to the concourse, they came upon the first knot of barghast, surrounding a small fire built from broken furniture. Tarps slung between the buildings down the avenue's length made the passage beyond a kind of tunnel, strikingly similar to market streets in 7 cities. Figures lay sleeping along the edges down the entire length. Various cook fires painted smoke-stained, mottled patterns of light on the undersides of the tarps. A good many barghast warriors remained awake, watchful. Talamandus murmured, "Try wending unseen through that press, wizard. We'll have to go round, assuming you still cling to your bizarre desire to slink like a mouse in a hut full of cats. In case you've forgotten, those are my kin." Quickben commanded under his breath, "Be quiet. Consider this another test of our partnership and the Warrens." Talamandus asked, "We're going straight through?" Quickben said, "We are." Talamandus said, "Which Warren? Not Driss again. Please, these cobbles." Quickben said, No. We'd end up soaked in old blood. We won't go under, Talamandus. We'll go over. Cirque, the path of the sky." Talamandus said, "Thought you'd exhausted yourself back at the estate." Quickben said, "I have, mostly. We could sweat a bit on this one." Talamandus said, "I don't sweat." Quickben said, "Let's test that, shall we?" and unveiled the Warren of Cirque. Little alteration was discernible in the scene around them. Then slowly, as Quickben's eyes adjusted, he detected currents in the air, the layers of cold and warm flowing parallel to the ground, the spirals coiling skywards from between the tarps, the wake of passing figures, the heat memory of stone and wood. Talamandus muttered, "Looks sickly. You would swim those currents?" Quickben said, "Why not? We're almost as insubstantial as the air we see before us. I can get us started, but the problem then is keeping me afloat. You're right, I've no reserves left. So it's up to you, Talamandus." Talamandus said, "Me? I know nothing of Cirque." Quickben said, "I'm not asking you to learn either. What I want is your power." Talamandus exclaimed, "That wasn't part of the deal!" Quickben said, "It is now." Talamandus shifted and twitched on Quickben's shoulder. He said, "By drawing on my power, you weaken the protection I offer against the poison." Quickben said, "And we need to find that threshold, Talamandus. I need to know what I can pull from you in an emergency." Talamandus demanded, "Just how nasty a situation are you anticipating when we finally challenge the crippled god? Those secret plans of yours, no wonder you're keeping them secret." Quickben said, "I could have sworn you said you were offering yourself up as a sacrifice to the cause. Do you now balk?" Talamandus said, "At madness? Count on it, wizard." Quickben smiled to himself. He said, "Relax. I'm not stoking a pyre for you, nor have I any plans to challenge the crippled god. Not directly. I've been face to face with him once, and once remains enough. Even so, I was serious about finding that threshold. Now, pull the cork, shaman, and let's see what we can manage." Hissing with fury, Talamandus growled reluctant assent. Quickben rose from the ground, slipped forward on the nearest current sweeping down the length of the street. The flow was cool, dipping down beneath the tarps. A moment before reaching the downdraft, the wizard nudged himself upward, into a spiral of heat from one of the fires. They shot straight up. Quickben snapped, "Damn it!" as he spun and cavorted on the column of heat. Gritting his teeth, the wizard reached for the stick-snare's power and found what he had suspected to be the truth all along. He thought, hoods, through and through. Of the Barghast gods, barely a drop of salty piss. The damn newcomers are stretched far too thin. Wonder what's drawing on their energies. There's a card in the deck, in the House of Death. That's been a role unfilled for a long, long time. The Magi. I think it's just found a face, one painted on a stupid acorn. Talamandus, you may have made a terrible mistake. And as for you, Barghast gods, here's some wisdom to heed in the future. Never hand your servants over to another god, because they're not likely to stay your servants for long. Instead, that god's likely to turn them into weapons aimed directly at your backs. Dear Barghast gods, you're in a world of predators, nastier by far than what was around in the past. Lucky for you, I'm here. That surprised me. Talamandis is the Magi of Death?
Yeah, very surprising. I guess it explains this, because I'm assuming like you, I thought the powers come from the Barghast. These Barghasts that laid down their lives, apparently, that we thought to fight this poison is apparently not true.
That may have been true at the time. I think the transition happened while Quickben was sick and asleep.
Okay, that's a good call.
Because Mallet was the one that was riding the souls to accomplish the healing. I think this is a little bit of a different scenario.
That's right. I think you're right. Sorry.
But I was really impressed with Quickben figuring this out. He's really too smart for his own good.
Yeah, he is. And I wonder how he knew that.
I think it's just because he's wily himself, so he's probably very suspicious and assumed that there's more going on with Talamandis having access to this much power, given how fresh the Barghast gods are.
Yes. Now, another question for you. Do you believe or do you know or think that Talamandis is aware? Or do you think he actively made a pact? Or was he made this maybe unbeknownst? Can that happen? Perrin was made Master of the Deck kind of unbidden.
Yeah, that's a good question. I do not know if he actively chose to be in that position or if he was traded by the Barghast gods.
Right. It's like the NFL draft.
Yeah, I was thinking baseball. I'm thinking
congratulations, welcome to the Malazan draft. We're gonna.
Yeah, exactly.
Whose house hood gonna pull now?
Quickben drew on Talamandis' power, harshly. The stick snare writhed, twig fingers digging into the wizard's shoulder and neck. In his mind, Quickben closed an implacable grip on the Lord of Death's power, and pulled. Quickben thought, come to me, bastard. We're going to talk, you and I. Within his clenched hands was the rough weave of cloth, stretching, bunching. The breath of death flowed over Quickben, the presence undeniable, heavy with rage, and in the clutch of a mortal entirely helpless. Quickben grunted a laugh. He said, so much for thresholds. You want to ally with me, Hood? All right, I'll give you fair consideration, despite the deception. But you're going to have to tell me what you're up to. Hood's voice was thunderous in Quickben's skull, launching waves of pain. He shouted, damned fool! Quickben said, quieter, or I'll drag you through hide and all, and Feigner won't be the only god who's fair game. Hood shouted, the House of Chains must be denied! Quickben blinked, knocked sideways by Hood's statement. He said, the House of Chains? It's the poison we're trying to excise, isn't it? Burns fever, the infected warrens. Hood said, the Master of the Deck must be convinced, mortal. The crippled god's house is finding adherents. Quickben said, wait a moment. Adherents? Among the Pantheon? Hood said, betrayal, aye. Poliel, mistress of pestilence, aspires to the role of consort to the King of Chains. A herald has been recruited. An ancient warrior seeks to become Reaver, whilst the house has found in a distant land its mortal sword. Maori now embraces the three, cripple, leper, and fool, which are in place of spinner, mason, and soldier. Most disturbing of all, ancient power trembles around the last of the dread cards. Mortal. The Master of the Deck must not remain blind to the threat. Wow, the crippled god sure has been busy with the recruiting. Reaver of the House of Chains is a new one that I'm unfamiliar with. And I also found it interesting that there's a mortal sword.
Yeah, the ancient one, that's going to be Calor, right?
He's the king in the House of Chains. That's what he accepted.
Okay, but they didn't list that here, though, did they?
They did. The Mistress of Pestilence aspires to be in the role of consort to the King in Chains.
Right.
So, separately, it's mentioned that an ancient warrior seeks to become Reaver. Reaver and Mortal Sword are two distinct roles, for sure. Also, the King is a distinct role. I don't know if we've been introduced to an ancient warrior that we would think would be aligned to this, that would fit the title of Reaver.
The only ancient warrior to me is Calor. And we know him to be assigned to King of Chains. So,
well, that's not necessarily true. Mappo theoretically could be considered an ancient warrior.
Well, I guess that's true.
Maybe Icarium. So I think we need to widen the breadth of what we're thinking about.
Yeah. One that intrigues me, though, is that Maori now embraces the three. Is Maori like a fate-type entity? In our mythology, in the Greek mythology, you've got the fates, you got the three. It's interestingly enough, I almost feel like cripple, leper, and fool are almost applicable to the fates in a weird way.
Maori was Lady of Beggars, Slaves, and Serfs, or the Lady of the Poor. So it kind of tracks.
Yeah, it does.
If you're downtrodden, I think people that are having a rough time may be, I don't want to say driven, but may gravitate towards the House of Chains.
We know who the cripple is. I just don't know the others, but interesting that he's sure really going to town. I didn't realize he had already, it's like, boy, he's sure filling these slots real quick. It's like, dude, been a busy fellow.
Yeah, it really hasn't been that long.
Yeah.
That long specifically since we saw, what's his name recruited? The Herald? What's his name?
Gethel.
It hasn't been that long since we saw Gethel get recruited. And then also Kalor.
Yeah.
I feel like that was maybe max 8 weeks ago, something like that.
Yeah. It's close.
Quickben scowled. He said, Captain Perrin's not the blinkered type, Hood. Indeed, he likely sees things clearer than even you, far more dispassionately, at least. And something tells me that cold reason is what will be needed come the time to decide. In any case, the House of Chains may be your problem, but the poison within the Warrens is mine. He thought that and what it's doing to Burn. Hood said, misdirection. Wizard, you are being led astray. You will find no answers, no solutions within the Panyan Daman, for the seer is at the heart of an altogether different tale. Quickben said, I'd guessed as much, Hood. Even so, I plan on unraveling the bastard and his power. Hood said, which will avail you nothing. Quickben grinned and said, that's what you think. I'm going to call upon you again, Hood. Hood said, and why should I answer? You've not heard a word Quickben interrupted. I have, but consider this, Lord. The Barghast gods may be young and inexperienced, but that won't last. Besides, young gods are dangerous gods. Scar them now, and they'll not forget the one who delivered the wound. You've offered to help, so you'd better do just that, Hood. Hood said, you dare threaten me? Quickben said, now who's not listening? I'm not threatening you, I'm warning you. And not just about the Barghast gods either. Treach has found a worthy mortal sword. Can you not feel him? Here I am, 1,000 paces or more away from him, with at least 20 walls of stone between us, and I can feel the man. He's wrapped in the pain of a death, someone close, whose soul you now hold. He's no friend of yours, Hood, this mortal sword. Hood said, do you not think I welcomed all that he has delivered? Treach promised me souls, and his human servant has provided them. No kidding.
Yeah, by the bushels.
After he filled a house with bodies, made that meat jello mold, and then all those bodies that led up the ramp up to the side of that thing.
Oh, golly. Be glad you don't work for the city. I'm Captain Stan on the cleanup crew. It's like, dude, I'm so glad I'm not on that job.
It seems like they got some contract workers coming in. The Barghast are cleaning up a lot of it.
Yeah, they are. They really are. They don't seem to be too bothered by that, I guess. I don't know.
Quickben said, in other words, the Tiger of Summer and the Barghast gods have followed through on their sides of the deal. Now, you'd better do the same, and that includes relinquishing Talamandus when the time comes. Hold to the spirit of the agreement, Hood, unless you learn nothing from the mistakes you made with Dasim Ultor.
Dasim Ultor.
We haven't learned much about this yet, only that Dasim Ultor was sworn to Hood, and something happened. Then Hood took Dasim's daughter, and she is now sleeping in the foyer in Tremorlore.
Yeah, this is a big mystery for me. For all of us.
Absolutely. I can't imagine he just randomly put her character there for no reason.
Oh, yeah.
There's got to be a reason he put her in there.
I can't remember the story of how she got there. Was she dead?
Well, she was kind of frozen in time, it seemed.
Right. I'm just not sure if she's alive or a corpse frozen in time. Because a corpse would never age and get bad there. I don't believe.
I don't think she was dead.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure ticked off Dasim, though.
Yeah, you take somebody's child away. Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Some bad blood going on there.
It is. And the testicular fortitude it will require from someone who worked for death to just basically take on a vengeance pact against his boss. It's
who
like,
is
wow,
death,
okay.
where you will end up eventually, probably, you know?
Yeah. Wow, okay.
Quickben felt seething rage burgeon from the Lord of Death, yet the god remained silent. Quickben growled, aye, think on that. In the meantime, you're going to ease loose your power, sufficient to carry me over this crowd of Barghast and into the plaza in front of the thrall. Then you're going to withdraw, far enough to give Talamandus the freedom he's supposed to have. Hover behind his painted eyes if you so desire, but no closer, until I decide I need you once more. Hood said, you will be mine one day, mortal. Quickben said, no doubt, Hood. In the meantime, let's just luxuriate in the anticipation, shall we? With these words, the wizard released his grip on Hood's cloak. The presence flinched back. It feels like Quick Ben is taking out a high-interest paycheck loan here.
Yeah. You pretty much are when you're facing that fella. And I think this kind of answered the question for me, though. I feel that Talamandus is unaware, in a way. Is that how you read that? That where his power's coming from?
We'll cover that in a couple sentences, because I think when Talamandus wakes up, we'll see, yeah.
Okay.
Separately, this is one of those scenarios like in Constantine where Satan personally comes to collect Constantine's soul when he dies. And I bet that Hood would come back for Quick Ben. And not in a reverent way like he did with Bruchalion, but out of eagerness to gloat that he finally got his hands on him.
Have you read much Constantine? Do you know the Dangerous Habits storyline?
No, I don't.
It is what's the Constantine... It's loosely the inspiration for the original Keanu Reeves Constantine storyline. The lung cancer and Satan. So it's similar to that, but it's a lot darker and more twisted in the fact that there are 3 lords of hell. And as he's dying, on the night he is dying and will die, he makes the pact with all 3 of them because all these boys are so eager to claim his soul, they didn't even pay attention. And he tricks them in such a way that they would destroy creation if they were to collect. That's how selfish Constantine is. He's willing to destroy creation to save his own soul and save his own life. And when it's all said and done, as he walks out the door, lights his smokes and gives a finger to the devil. So, yeah, not engendering a lot of goodwill. That's just, and I wonder if Quick Ben is a shout out to Constantine. There's not as much nastiness from Quick Ben as there is in Constantine, but there is that rascaliness of Constantine is very much part of Quick Ben.
Part of me thinks, I actually just came up with this thought while I was reading through it. I bet Quick Ben is gonna try and follow in Shadow Throne's footsteps. He probably thinks there's a way for him to become an ascendant, and he'll never have to pay back what's going on here.
Oh, I'm assuming that's it, yeah. The fact he is what he is so different from what we've seen from others. Is he already? I think he's on the path to it.
Yeah, he's probably on the path to it, but definitely not yet. He's not an ascendant yet.
Okay.
Power flowed steady, the currents of air drawing Quick Ben and the stick snare clinging to his shoulder over the tops of the canopies. Talamandus hissed. He said, "What has happened? I, vanished for a moment." Quick Ben murmured, "Everything's fine. Does the power feel true, stick snare?" Talamandus said, "Aye, it does. This I can use." Quick Ben said, "Glad to hear it. Now guide us to the plaza." So that little section, going back to your point, is Talamandus aware that this thing with Hood's going on? I actually don't think so. I think this deal was probably done behind his back with the Barghast gods and Hood, and Quick Ben just sussed it out and then had a Hood back off a little bit.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's really cool of Quick Ben.
Mm-hmm.
In a way to kind of back off on Talamandus. So let Talamandus use it. Because you and I have an unusual fascination with Talamandus for some reason. I like that more for some reason. That stick snare for some reason. I really like him a lot.
Ever since he was introduced from the beginning, I've always liked him. He's just a really quirky character, and I always enjoyed the way he interacts with Quick Ben.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the same, man. Very much.
Also, I guess it's nice to see some spirit that's not malevolent.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, I would suspect that there's some shenanigans that are going to go on, and they're trying to get the upper hand on the mortals in some way.
Oh, yeah. That's my assumption for sure. So, yeah, I like seeing this kind of mutual respect, working respect.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Elsewhere in Kapustan, a thin gauze of old smoke dulled the stars overhead. Perrin sat on the wide steps of the thrall's main entrance. Directly ahead, at the end of a wide avenue, stood the gatehouse. Visible through its open doorway, in the plaza beyond, firelight from Barghast camps gleamed through gathering mists. Perrin was exhausted, yet sleep would not come to him. His thoughts had wandered countless paths since he'd left Kafal's company 2 bells earlier. Barghast shouldermen still working in the chamber, dismantling the canoes, collecting ancient weapons. Outside that room and beyond that activity, the thrall seemed virtually deserted, lifeless. Kafal had said they were going to document the means with which these vessels were crafted. Given what we know of the Barghast, I wonder how they would go about doing that. Their craftsmen are making subpar equipment at the moment, and I think that the engineering mindset hasn't flourished under their current conditions as a warrior culture.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm curious if he's kind of maybe thinking, with the plans with the swords is to get the young kids on it so they'll learn new ways. Maybe he's going to, hedging his bets and hoping that these youngers will be fired up by being trained in this, maybe he's going to work on the next generation to try and get them fired up to be motivated to do this, because it's not going to be an overnight thing no matter what.
There's two aspects to this conversation. So you're talking about learning the weapons, right, and how they work.
Mm-hmm.
Separately, there was the part of the conversation where they're talking about the boats, and they were going to dismantle the boats and learn how they're constructed. That type of craftsmanship, if they don't have master craftsmen already that can analyze the joins in the wood and all the intricacies there, I look at it as like a bunch of chimpanzees trying to reverse engineer furniture. You know what I mean? Like, they don't have the crafting methodology in the background to understand. These boats were made to look like they came from one tree, and I think they were carved from one tree, but there was additional craftsmanship involved in them.
So we have cousins that have embraced that side, while the other side embraced a warrior mindset. So, I mean, I could see the Moranth figuring this stuff out with the Barghest and helping these fellas, because they seem to be the guys that are more interested in forward progress, but they seem to be only concerned in forward progress in warfare. I don't know if I'm right in that or not. I don't know anything about the Moranth other than the fact they're color coded, and they're they don't seem to get along with each other according to their color codes.
We really haven't seen a lot of their craftsmanship outside of the alchemical stuff for the Moranth munitions, which, to be fair, is probably a very advanced manufacturing process.
Yes.
You don't get that highly volatile chemical type stuff that easily, because they figured out how to manufacture, put the clay around it without it blowing them up. So, yeah, they probably do have some craftsmen.
Your use of corals and other things are very unlike every other group of humanoids we meet on this planet, for the most part. So to me, these seem like a very superior race. I don't mean, right, but, as far as higher technical evolved race, I guess is the way I'm trying to put it, for the Moranth versus the Barghest, and a lot of the other human cultures, as far as from what little we've seen of the Barghest, the Moranth, because their armor is also very suited up armor. That's got to be kind of pretty high technology involved in their armor as well.
The quarrels, I don't really see that as too different to domesticating veteran or horses or whatever, because they're just taking an animal.
That's land animals. That requires. It is, but it's like most people aren't thinking of going, I wonder if I can fly this thing.
Okay.
Most of the, at least I believe.
It's definitely different.
They're a little crazier. Yeah. And they were definitely like, they're the Chuck Yeagers of the bunch.
Yeah, remember when Perrin got on that thing, I think the first time he got a little sick, didn't he?
It was rough, yeah.
Getting nervous flying up there. For anybody that is used to being on the land, I'm sure that first flight's really scary.
Yeah.
The empty halls and corridors led Perrin inexorably to what he imagined his parents' estate in Unta might now look like, with his mother and father dead, Felicin chained to a line in some mining pit 1,000 leagues away, and dear sister Tavora dwelling in a score opulent chambers in Lassine's palace. A house alone with its memories, looted by servants and guards and the street's gutter rats. Did the adjunct ever ride past? Did her thoughts turn to it in the course of her busy day? She was not one to spare a moment to sentiment. Cold-eyed, hers was a brutal rationality, pragmatism with 1,000 honed edges, to cut open anyone foolish enough to come close. The Empress would be well pleased with her new adjunct. The only impressions we have of Tavora at the moment are those of Felicin and Perrin, neither of which are particularly favorable. Felicin, I totally understand, given Tavora sent her out with the nobles during the culling in the prologue of Deadhouse Gates. And then Perrin, on the other hand, he's going off of who he remembers her to be years ago. And I'm curious if she's changed in the interim, just as the other two have in the time that we've had with them.
That's a really good question. And strangely enough, I don't know if it's a question we'll ever really be able to answer, because we don't really get to know Tavora until later. And so I'm assuming that she's made some changes, but I don't know if she's changed that much. She's still just master, from what we understand, strategist.
Yeah, I think we picked up a little bit of that when Perrin went home.
Yeah. Other than she got a cold, but Again, I can't say anything to that either, because she may have just been being cold to Perrin because she hadn't seen him in years, and all of a sudden he's here. Where you been? I'm taking care of all this business. Where you been? So yeah. I don't know if that's true. You know what I'm saying? That was so. What little bit? We haven't seen her say 20 words, I don't think.
Yeah, we haven't yet, and yeah, we've only seen other people's side of the story in that relationship. We don't know anything about her yet.
Yes.
Perrin thought, and what of you, Felicin, with your wide smile and dancing eyes? There is no modesty in the Odotaral mines, nothing to shield you from the worst of human nature. You'll have been taken under the wing nonetheless by some pimp or pit thug, a flower crushed underfoot. Yet your sister has it in mind to retrieve you, that much I know of her. She might well have thrown in a guardian or two for the length of your sentence, but she'll not be rescuing a child, not any more. No smile, and something hard and deadly in those once dancing eyes. You should have found another way, sister. Gods, you should have killed Felicin outright. That would have been a mercy. And now I fear you will someday pay dearly. I find it interesting that he thinks Tavora would have facilitated a guardian for Felicin in this scenario.
What I find kind of interesting is the fact that he basically spelled out the whole sin. He called it all.
Yeah.
He called the exact thing that happened to her down to not to singular guardian, but to multiple guardians. And it's like, wow, he called it exactly. And I think it's interesting that he not only knows, so it shows he must know his sister enough, and most of his sisters, I guess they must have all kind of looked after for Felicin, because she's not capable of looking after herself. It's kind of, so these two probably always kind of had to look after her. And so he just assumed that she just took care of her, no matter, not the right way, but took care of her.
I'm curious if there's ever a situation where the youngest is the one that isn't being taken care of.
Yeah.
Perrin slowly shook his head. His was a family none would envy. He thought, torn apart by our own hands, no less. And now, we siblings, each launched on our separate fates. The likelihood of those fates one day converging never seemed so remote. The worn steps before him were flecked with ash, as if the only survivor in the city was the stone itself. The darkness felt solemn, sorrowful. All the sounds that should have accompanied the night in this place were absent. He thought, Hood feels close this night. I bet he does. Quick Ben just dragged Hood kicking and screaming into a conversation with him in Capistan like 1,000 paces away.
Right?
One of the massive double doors behind him swung open. Perrin glanced back over his shoulder, then nodded and said, Mortal sword, you look well rested. Gruntle grimaced, then said, I feel beaten to within a finger's breadth of my life. That's a mean woman. He is, of course, referring to Hitan in this scenario.
I'm sorry, I can't stop laughing over that. It's just, we know how tough he's gotten and how many people he's killed in this battle, and he's coming in there thinking, man, that's a mean woman.
Yes.
Dadgum. Wow.
Perrin said, I've heard men say that of their women before, and always there's a pleased hint to the complaint, as I hear now. Gruntle frowned. He said, Aye, you're right. Funny that. Perrin said, These stairs are wide. Have a seat if you like. Gruntle said, I would not disturb your solitude, Captain. Perrin said, Please do. It's nothing I would regret abandoning. Too many dark thoughts creep in when I'm alone. Gruntle moved forward and slowly settled down onto the step at Perrin's side. He rested his forearms on his knees and said, I share the same curse, Captain. Perrin said, Fortunate, then, that you found Hitan. Gruntle grunted, then said, Problem is, she's insatiable. Perrin said, In other words, you're the one in search of solitude, which my presence has prevented. Gruntle said, So long as you don't claw my back, your company is welcome. Perrin nodded and said, I'm not the catty type. Sorry.
Wow.
Gruntle said, No need. If Trake ain't got a sense of humor, that's his problem. Then again, he must have, since he picked me as his mortal sword. Perrin studied the man beside him. Behind the barbed tattoos was a face that had lived hard years. Weathered, roughly chiseled, with eyes that matched those of a tiger's now that the god's power was within his flesh and blood. Nonetheless, there were laugh lines around those eyes. He said, Seems to me Trake chose wisely. Gruntle said, Not if he expects piety or demands vows. Hood knows, I don't even like fighting. I'm not a soldier and have no desire to be. How then am I supposed to serve the god of war? Perrin said, Better you, I think, than some bloodlusting squarefoot with a single eyebrow, Gruntle. Reluctance to unsheathe those swords and all they represent seems a good thing to me. The gods know it's rare enough at the moment. Gruntle said, Not sure about that. This whole city was reluctant. The priests, the Gidrath, even the Grey Swords. If there had been any other way. He shrugged, then went on. The same for me. If it wasn't for what happened to Harlow and Stani, I'd be down in the tunnels right now, gibbering with the rest of them. Perrin said, Stani's your friend with the broken rapier, right? Who's Harlow? Gruntle turned his head away for a moment, then with a bitter tone said, Another victim, Captain. Just one more on the trail. So I hear that your Malazan army's just west of here, come to join this death-cursed war. Why? Perrin said, A temporary aberration. We ran out of enemies. Gruntle said, soldier's humor. I never could understand it. Is fighting that important to you? Perrin said, if you mean me personally, then no, it isn't. But for men like Dujek One-Arm and Whiskey Jack, it's the sum total of their lives. They're makers of history. Their gift is the power to command. What they do revises the scholars' maps. As for the soldiers who follow them, I say that most of them see it as a profession, a career, probably the only one they're any good at. They are the physical will of the commanders they serve, and so are their own makers of history, one soldier at a time. Gruntle asked, and what happens if their commanders are suicidal fools? Perrin said, it's a soldier's lot to complain about their officers. Every mud-crusted footman is an artist at second-guessing, master strategists after the fact. But the truth is, the Malazan Empire has a tradition of superb, competent commanders. Hard and fair, usually from the ranks, though I'll grant you my own noble class has made destructive inroads on that tradition. Had I myself followed a safer path, I might well be a fist by now. Not through competence, of course, or even experience. Connections would have sufficed. The Empress has finally recognized the rot, however, and has already acted upon it, though likely too late. Too bad she didn't get to Pormqual before 7 cities went up in flames. The whole chain of dogs may have been preventable.
Yep. You and I always lament the loss of Coltang because he could have really, you imagine his assistance on this war. A guy that's that motivated, to him and Dujek, they would have cut their way quicker through this stuff.
I wonder at that, if it makes sense to have 2 high fists together, or would she have sent them somewhere else to deal with another situation?
Might have sent them someplace else to deal with another situation, but they would have expanded territory quicker by having 2 powerful fists.
Yeah, if they worked in concert with each other, but on separate fronts, maybe? Something along those lines?
Yes.
Gruntle asked, then why in Hood's name would she have outlawed Dujek One-Arm? Perrin was silent for a moment, then he shrugged and said, politics. Expedience can force even the hand of an empress, I suppose. Gruntle muttered, has the sound of a feint to me. You don't cut loose your best commander in a fit of pique. Perrin said, you might be right. Alas, I'm not the one who can either confirm or deny. There's some old wound still festering between Lysine and Dujek in any case. Gruntle said, Captain Perrin, you speak too freely for your own good. Not that I'm a liability, mind you, but you've an openness and an honesty that might earn you the gallows someday. Perrin said, here's some more, mortal sword. A new house has appeared, seeking membership in the Deck of Dragons. It belongs to the crippled god. I can feel the pressure, the voice of countless gods, all demanding that I deny my sanction, since it seems that I am the one cursed with that responsibility. Do I bless the House of Chains or not? The arguments against such a blessing are overwhelming. I don't need any god whispering in my head to apprise me of that. Gruntle asked, so where is the problem, Captain? Perrin said, it's simple. There's a lone voice crying out, deep within me, so buried as to be almost inaudible. A lone voice, Gruntle, demanding the very opposite. Demanding that I must sanction the House of Chains. I must bless the crippled god's right to a place within the Deck of Dragons. Gruntle asked, and whose voice cries out such madness? Perrin said, I think it's mine. Gruntle was silent for a dozen heartbeats, yet Perrin felt the man's unhuman eyes fix on him. Eventually the mortal sword looked away and shrugged, then said, I don't know much about the Deck of Dragons, used for divinations, yes? Not something I've ever pursued. Perrin said, nor I. Gruntle barked a laugh, then he slowly nodded and said, and what did you say of me earlier? Better a man who hates war to serve the god of war than one who lusts for it? Thus, why not a man who knows nothing of the Deck of Dragons to adjudicate it rather than a lifelong practitioner? Perrin said, you may have something there. Not that it alleviates my sense of inadequacy. Gruntle said, aye, just that. He paused, then continued, I felt my god recoil at your words. Captain, your instincts on the crippled god's House of Chains. But as I said before, I'm not a follower, so I guess I saw it different. If Trake wants to tremble on 4 watery legs, that's his business. Perrin said, your lack of fear has me curious, Gruntle. You seem to see no risk in legitimizing the House of Chains. Why is that? The man shrugged his massive shoulders and said, but that's just it, isn't it? Legitimizing. Right now the crippled god's outside the whole damned game, meaning he's not bound by any rules whatsoever. Perrin suddenly sat straight. He said, you're right. Abyss take me, that's it. If I bless the House of Chains, then the crippled god becomes bound. Gruntle said, just another player, aye, jostling around the same board. Right now he just keeps kicking it wherever he gets the chance. When he's on it, he won't have that privilege. Anyway, that's how it seems to me, Captain. So when you said you wanted to sanction the house, I thought, why the fuss? Sounds perfectly reasonable to me. The gods can be damn thick-witted on occasion, probably why they need us mortals to do the straight thinking when straight thinking's required. Listen to that lone voice, lad. That's my advice. Perrin said, and it's good advice.
Agreed.
Gruntle said, maybe or maybe not. I might end up being roasted over the eternal fires of the abyss by Trake and all the other gods for having given it. Perrin grinned and said, I'll have company then. Gruntle added, good thing we both hate solitude. Perrin said, that's a soldier's humor, Gruntle. Gruntle said, is it? But I was being serious, Captain. Perrin said, oh. Gruntle glanced over and said, got you. Couple of things here. First, I love how Perrin keeps finding kindred spirits throughout these books and makes strong connections with them. This will help him feel less like he's on his own sorting this whole situation out.
Yeah, I really enjoy that too. And he's had these moments in almost every book where he, just kind of in a moment of just like, just golly, what's going on here, and overwhelmed, finally kind of getting his head bearings, runs into just the right person, says just the right thing to him. That's happened before to him, I believe. And Gardens, it kind of
with Call
worked up that way for him too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, wow, I love it. I mean, I just love it. I agree with you.
Second, the concept of sanctioning the House of Chains to force them to follow the same rules as everyone else is a creative idea. Sometimes you just need someone that isn't as close to the problem to see the solution.
Yeah, you'd think someone like Rake would have gone like, yeah, do it, man. We've been here, done this before. Yeah, you just do that. It's not a problem. But they're all too close to the problem to see it, I guess.
Yeah, they're too emotionally invested as well, I think.
Yeah, you're right about that.
There's a past history there. They had to make sacrifices. So there's a lot of probably bias against that position.
Yeah.
A sliding downdraft of cool air brought Quick Ben onto the gritty flagstones of the plaza. A dozen paces ahead loomed the gatehouse. Beyond it, seated side by side on the thrall's wide, low steps, sat Perrin and Gruntle. Quick Ben relinquished the warren of Cirque and muttered, just the two I wanted to talk with. From his perch on Quick Ben's shoulder, Talamanda said, no more arguments, please. Those are two powerful men. Quick Ben said, relax. I'm not anticipating a confrontation. Talamanda said, well, I'll make myself unseen, just in case. Quick Ben said, suit yourself. Talamandus vanished, though Quick Ben could still feel his meager weight, and the twig fingers gripped his cloak. The two men looked up as Quick Ben approached. Perrin nodded a greeting. He said, last time I saw you, you were racked with fever. I'm glad to see you're better. Gruntle, this is Quick Ben, a soldier in the bridge burners. Gruntle said, a mage. Perrin said that too. Gruntle studied Quick Ben for a moment, and Perrin sensed a bestial presence shifting uneasily behind the man's amber, feline eyes. Then Gruntle said, you smell of death, and it's not to my liking. Quick Ben started. He said, indeed? I've been consorting with the wrong company lately. Unpalatable, agreed, but alas, necessary. Gruntle asked, is it just that? Quick Ben said, I hope so, mortal sword. A brutal threat glared for a moment in Gruntle's eyes, then slowly dimmed. He managed to shrug, then said, it was a bridge burner who saved Stani's life, so I'll keep my reins taut, at least until I see if it wears off. Perrin said to Quick Ben, consider it an elaborate way of saying you need to bathe soon. Quick Ben eyed Perrin and said, well, humor from you makes for a change. Perrin said, plenty of changes of late. If you're looking to rejoin the company, they're in the Gidrath barracks. Quick Ben said, actually, I bring word from Whiskey Jack. Perrin sat straighter. He said, you've managed to contact him? Despite the poisoned warrens? Impressive, wizard. Now you have my utmost attention. Has he new orders for me? Quick Ben said, another parley has been requested by Brood, with all the commanders, including Gruntle here, and Humbrel Tar, and whomever's left of the Grey Swords. Can you make the request known to the other principals here in Kapustan? Perrin said, I suppose so. Is that it? Quick Ben said, if you've a report to make to Whiskey Jack, I can convey it. Perrin said, no thank you. I'll save that for when we meet in person. Quick Ben scowled and thought, be that way then. Nosy. Trying to get in everybody's business.
Well, I like that. Be that way. It's almost like a you will pay. It's just shy of that. We'll be that way.
I was at my wife's aunt's house for Easter yesterday, and there was a calendar. They're cat people, and they had this cat that had this head wrapping on it like some type of cap that was knitted, and the caption read, you will pay for this. And I almost took a picture of it and sent it to you. It wasn't the exact quote though, so I was like, okay, it's not exactly you will pay for that, right. But I thought of you when I saw that calendar.
Oh, that's great, dude. That's so funny.
Quick Ben said, "Regarding the west, best we speak in private, Captain." Gruntle made to rise, but Perrin reached out and halted his motion. Perrin said, "I can probably anticipate your questions right here and now, Quick Ben." Quick Ben said, "Maybe you can, but I'd rather you didn't." Perrin said, "Too bad for you then. I'll make it plain. I have not yet decided whether or not to sanction the House of Chains. In fact, I haven't decided anything about anything, and it might be some time before that changes. Don't bother trying to pressure me either." Quick Ben raised both hands and said, "Please, Captain, I have no intention of pressuring you, since I was the victim of such an effort only a short while ago, by Hood himself, and it's left me riled. When someone warns me to follow one course of action, my instinct is to do the very opposite. You're not the only one inclined to stir the manure." Gruntle barked, laughed, and said, "Such droll understatement. Seems I found perfect company this night. Do go on, wizard." Quick Ben went on. "Only one more thing to add, an observation. Might be a wrong one, but I don't think so. You got sick, Captain, not from resisting the power forced upon you, but from resisting yourself. Whatever your instincts are demanding, listen to them. Follow them, and abyss take the rest. That's all." Perrin quietly asked, "Is that your advice, or Whiskey Jack's?" Quick Ben shrugged and said, "If he was here, he'd say no different, Captain." Perrin said, "You've known him a long time, haven't you?" Quick Ben said, "Aye, I have." After a moment, Perrin nodded. He said, "I just about reached the same conclusion myself, this night, with Gruntle's help, that is. It seems the three of us are about to make some very powerful beings very angry." Gruntle said, "Let 'em squeal. Hood knows we've done more than our share," while they sat back and laughed. Time's come to pull the gauntlet onto the other hand. Quick Ben sighed under his breath and thought, "All right, Hood. So I didn't really try, but only because it was clear that Perrin wasn't inclined to heed you. Maybe I see why, now that I think on it. So, for what it's worth, consider this advice. There will be a House of Chains. Accept it and prepare for it. You've ample time, more or less. Oh, one more thing, Hood. You and your fellow gods have been calling out the rules uncontested for far too long. Step back now and see how us mortals fare. I think you're in for a surprise or two." It's pretty cool that Gruntle and Quick Ben were here to help reinforce Perrin in his decision at this point in time.
Yeah, that is awesome. Just the right time. I love it.
Yeah, three rebellious spirits all gathered together. It's kind of the worst nightmare for the gods.
Oh, yeah. These are all three prime instigators here.
Wan, dirt-smeared, but alive. The survivors of Kapustan emerged from the last pit mouth as the sky paled to the east, blanched dwellers from the city's roots, shining from the torchlight as they stumbled onto the concourse, where they milled, as if lost in the place they had once known as home. Akovian sat once more astride his warhorse, even though any quick movement made him sway, head spinning with exhaustion and the pain of his wounds. His task now was to be visible. His sole purpose was his presence. Familiar, recognizable, reassuring. Come the new day, the priests of the mass council would begin a procession through the city to add their own reassurance, that authority remained, that someone was in control, that things, life could now begin again. But here, in the still darkness, a time Akovian had chosen to ease the shock of the surrounding ruination, with the priests sleeping soundly in the thrall, the Grey Swords, numbering 319 in all when including those from the tunnels, were positioned at every tunnel mouth and at every place of convergence. They were there to ensure martial law and impart a somber order to the proceedings. But their greatest value, as Akovian well knew, was psychological. Akovian thought, "We are the defenders, and we still stand." While grieving was darkness, victory and all it meant was a graying to match the dawn, a lessening of the oppression that was lost, and of the devastation that slowly revealed itself on all sides. There could be no easing of the conflict within each and every survivor, the brutal randomness of fate that plagued the spirit, but the Grey Swords made of themselves a simple, solid presence. They had become, in truth, the city's standard. Akovian thought, and we still stand. Once this task was complete, the contract was, to Akovian's mind, concluded. Law and order could be left to the Gidrath from the thrall. The surviving Grey Swords would leave Kapustan, likely never to return. The question now occupying Akovian concerned the company's future. From over 7,000 to 319. This was a siege from which the Grey Swords might never recover. But even such horrific losses, if borne alone, were manageable. The expelling of Feanor from his warren was another matter. An army sworn to a god bereft of its power was, as far as Akovian was concerned, no different from any other band of mercenaries. A collection of misfits and a scattering of professional soldiers. A column of coins offered no reliable backbone. Few were the existent companies that could rightly lay claim to honor and integrity. Few would stand firm when flight was possible. Recruiting to strength had become problematic. The Grey Swords needed sober, straight-backed individuals, ones capable of accepting discipline of the highest order, ones for whom a vow held meaning. Akovian thought twin tusks What I need is fanatics. At the same time, such people had to be without ties of any sort, an unlikely combination. And given such people could be found, to whom could they swear? Not Trake. That army's core already existed, centered around Gruntle. There were two other war-aspected gods that Ikovian knew of. Northern gods, rarely worshipped here in the Midlands or to the south. He thought, what did Hitan call me? She never likened me to a cat or a bear. No, in her eyes, I was a wolf. Very well then. He raised his head, scanned over the heads of the milling survivors in the concourse until he spied the other lone rider. She was watching him. Ikovian gestured her over. It was a few moments before she could pick her horse through the press and reach his side. She said, Sir? Ikovian said, Find the captain. We three have a task before us, sir. The woman saluted, swung her mount round. He watched her ride onto a side street, then out of sight. There was a strong logic behind his decision, yet for him it felt hollow, as if he personally was to have no part to play in what was to come beyond the act of preparation, no subsequent role in what had to be. Nonetheless, the survival of the Grey Swords took precedence over his own wishes, indeed his own life. He thought, it has to be this way. I can think of no other. A new Reeve must be fashioned. Even in this, I am not yet done. Captain Norul found a horse for herself. Her face was aged beneath the rim of her helm. Sleep had been denied them all for too long. She said nothing as she and the recruit reined in beside the shield anvil. We're back to calling her the recruit again? Her name is Velbara.
Yes. Technically, I think she's still a recruit. Not in action, just in length of service. But I would think that, in my mind, that she should be Velbara. We've called her Velbara. She needs to be this. She needs to remain so.
Yeah, I think he does have a tendency to shift to their title as a descriptor as he's going through the paragraphs. So that's probably what's going on here. I wanted to remind everybody that the recruit has a name, which we found out.
And her name is Velbara.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Ikovian said, Follow me, sirs, and wheeled his mount. They rode through the city and left through the north gate. Encamped on the hills a third of a league away were the Barghast, the yurts and tents sparsely patrolled by a modest rearguard. Smoke rose from countless fires as the camp's old men and women began their morning meal. Children already ran down the uneven aisles, quieter than their city counterparts, but no less energetic. The three Grey Swords crossed the looted remains of the Panyan lines and rode directly for the nearest Barghast camp. Ikovian was not surprised to see a half-dozen old women gathering to meet them at the camp's edge. He thought, there is a current that carries us to this, and you witches have felt it as surely as have I, and thus the trueness is made known and plain. The realization did little to diminish the bleakness of his resolution. He thought, consider it but one more burden, Shield Anvil, one for which you were made as you were for all the others. They drew rein before the Barghast elders. No one spoke for a long moment, then one old woman cackled and gestured. She said, Come then. Ikovian dismounted, his companions following suit. Children appeared to take the reins of the three horses, and the beasts were led away. The elders, led by the spokeswoman, set off down the camp's main path, to a large yurt at the far end. The entrance was flanked by two Barghast warriors. The old woman hissed at them, and both men retreated. Man, I bet these guys are terrified of that old woman.
Oh, yeah. Well, one thing I will say, these Barghast do know how to respect their elders, and especially these women that seem to be kind of some kind of shoulder women or something like that. Put the fear on them.
Yeah, definitely. They hold a lot of power. Ikovian, Velbara, and Norul followed the elders into the yurt's interior. The spokeswoman hobbled to the other side of the central hearth and lowered herself onto a bundle of furs, then said, Rare is the man who comes to this place. Ikovian said, I am honored. She cackled and cut him off. Don't be! You would have to beat a warrior senseless and drag him, and even then it's likely his brothers and friends would attack you before you reach the entrance. You, a young man, are among old women, and there is nothing in the world more perilous. Another woman cried, But look at him! He has no fear! A third woman sniffed and said, The hearth of his soul is nothing but ashes. The first woman said, Even so, with what he now seeks, he would promise a firestorm to a frozen forest. Tagatha and Farrand, the lovers lost to each other for eternity, the winter hearts that howl in the deep fastness of Lateron and beyond. We have all heard those mournful cries in our dreams, have we not? They come closer, only not from the north. Oh no, not the north. And now this man, she leaned forward, lined face indistinct before the hearth's smoke inside, this man. Ikovian drew a deep breath, then gestured to Velbara and said, The mortal sword. The old woman growled, No. Ikovian faltered. He said, But. The old woman again said, No. He has been found. He exists. It is already done. Look at her hands, wolf. There is too much caring in them. She shall be the destriant. I wonder who the mortal sword is.
I know it. That's a great question. I have it the foggiest.
I can't think of any wolf-influenced warrior-type people that we've come across off the top of my head.
Unless it's someone we haven't met, possibly.
Yeah.
He does that, too. He sometimes points forward.
Akovian said, Are you certain of this? The old woman ignored Akovian's question and nodded towards Norul, then said, And this one, she is to be what you were. She will accept the burden. You, Wolf, have shown her all she must know. The truth of that is in her eyes, and in the love she holds for you. She would be its answer in kind, in blood. She shall be the shield anvil. The other elders were nodding agreement, their eyes glittering in the gloom, above beaked noses, as if a murder of crows now faced Akovian. He slowly turned to Captain Norul. The veteran looked stricken. Norul faced Akovian and said, Sir, what? Akovian struggled to contain his own welling of pain and anguish. He rasped, For the grey swords. It must be done, sir. Tog, Lord of Winter, a god of war long forgotten, recalled among the Barghast as the wolf spirit, Togatha, and his lost mate, the she-wolf, Fandere, Farrand in the Barghast tongue. Among our company now, more women than men. A reeve must be proclaimed, kneeling before the wolf god and the wolf goddess. You are to be the shield anvil, sir. And you, he said to Velbara, whose eyes were wide, are to be the destriant. The grey swords are remade, sirs. The sanction is here, now, among these wise women. Norul stepped back, armor clanking. She said, Sir, you are the shield anvil of the grey swords. Akovian interrupted, No, I am the shield anvil of Fainur, and Fainur, sir, is gone. Norul said, The company is virtually destroyed, sir. Our recovery is unlikely. The matter of quality. Akovian cut her off. You will require fanatics, Captain. That cast of mind, of breeding and culture is vital. You must search, sir. You must needs find such people. People with nothing left to their lives, with their faith dismantled. People who have been made lost. Norul was shaking her head, but he could see growing comprehension in her gray eyes. Akovian continued, Captain, the grey swords shall march with the 2 foreign armies, south, to see the end of the Panyan Daman, and, at a time deemed propitious, you will recruit. You will find the people you seek, sir, among the Teniscauri. How fitting. There is no better opportunity for them than among that crowd.
Yeah.
They would find so many people looking for something in the wake of what they endured as part of the Teniscauri horde.
Oh, yeah. There's a chance for redemption, a chance to prove yourself, to be honorable, and a chance to just have a life. And there would be a lot of gratitude, I think. You could get you get a heck of a fanatical horde out of that one, out of just out of gratitude alone, maybe.
I always go back to the idea of, like, what did somebody do that had a family? You know the family is destroyed at this point. If they had kids, the chances that they survived that pecking order of starvation, very slim. Husbands and wives ripped apart. You know, you're not going to want to go back to try and recreate that scenario again. It'd be too painful. So you probably just want a net new, fresh start, something completely different. This provides the perfect opportunity to do something instead of just drink yourself to death or whatever.
I find it quite poetic, and I think it's kind of a beautiful thing to do to that horde.
Counterpoint. Would they be preying on people that are in a weakened state to, it's not really take advantage of them, but I know that the Grey Swords are doing it because they think it's good for them. But would some people look at it as them taking advantage of the situation?
Sure. There's always that bunch. There's always a group that's going to protest something.
Okay. Akovian thought, Fear not. I shall not abandon you yet, my friend. There is much you must learn. And, it seems, no end to my purpose. He saw the bleakness come to her, saw it, and struggled against the horror of what he had done. Some things should never be shared. He thought, and that is my most terrible crime. For to the title, the burden that is shield anvil, I gave her no choice. I gave her no choice. And thus the chapter ends.
Wow.
What a large chapter.
What a large chapter.
A lot of good stuff, though.
Well, tons of great stuff. It was one of the longest chapters we've ever covered, I think. And it just and it was not, every bit was necessary.
Yeah.
Everything was necessary.
Yeah. It moved along at a good pace. Wasn't covering.
Yes.
Wait, did we have the Maib in this for one section? I think we might have for a little bit.
At the very, very beginning, maybe in the first section of this?
Yeah.
Possibly.
Okay.
But I'm wanting to think, but for some reason I want to think the Maib was actually part of the last chapter, but I can't remember because it's
so long. We
been on this
can't remember.
It's been a month.
All right, yeah. For standout moments, Quick Ben figuring out that Talamandus' power wasn't coming from the Barghast gods, but from Hood himself.
That is amazing. And I just love how he sussed that out. It blows me away how he managed to figure that out.
Yeah. He's really sharp.
Dude, he is the man.
Then grabbing a hold of Hood and giving him a talking to. Then Hood reminding Quick Ben that one day he will have his soul.
That was great, dude. I love how Quick Ben is one of these, we'll burn that bridge when we get to it kind of mindset. Yeah, it's like,
Finding out how much recruiting that the crippled god has accomplished since the last time we saw some of that activity.
Staggering. I mean, he's almost got... I don't think we've ever been painted out what a full house might look like, but he's got more players in the game, it seems like, than anyone else we've heard so far. So it's like he's building a pretty quick team there. I'm kind of impressed. Pretty big eye-opener.
Yeah. The fact that there's so many people willing to join him. I wonder if it's just opportunists, people that are in a bad situation on their own. He's choosing the downtrodden or people that perceive wrongs against them. So there's probably plenty of people to pick from.
Oh, yeah.
Perrin taking a moment to think about his sisters and what has transpired during the last couple books.
Yeah, and this gets me a little sad because we know at least what happened to one of the sisters and she's still around, but it's just so horrible what has happened to her. And I'm really looking forward to meeting Tavora more. Getting to know her more. We've seen her, but it's so cameo, dude. It's like I said, I don't think, like we said earlier this episode, I don't think she said 20 words to us or 50 words to us. So it's like, I'm looking forward to actually getting to know them because so far, like her or not, Felicity, even though she is kind of an irritant, the Perrins are some pretty major players in this universe. I need to know what's going on with Tavora.
I think it was this read through where I realized that so much of this series revolves around that house.
Yes.
Sure, there's many other major characters, but they do so much to drive the story forward. It's crazy.
Yeah, I love it, dude. I'm like you. I didn't spot that till this go through, like you said. That was something I didn't see either.
Gruntle and Perrin having a really good conversation. I enjoyed Gruntle noting Perrin's frankness and their ability to work through the ramifications of sanctioning the House of Chains together.
I really love this because I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to flash back to some South Park on this one. This reminds me, it's like the solution for the Super Best Friends episode that is now banned. Mm-hmm. About how do we solve the, you know what I'm talking about here.
It's been so long since I watched that. I remember that episode, but I can't remember the plot.
So David Blaine has got his army of Blaneiacs taking over the world. And so what he does is he animates the Lincoln Monument, and President Lincoln is running around tearing things up. The giant statue of him. So the Super Best Friends are all gathered together talking to the Moses/Tron looking entity. And they're like, how do we kill a giant animated statue of Abraham Lincoln? And so the Moses/Tron entity looks very uneasy, kind of looking back and forth like, you make a giant statue of John Wilkes Booth. And that's almost the answer that's given. And of course, they make the statue walks up behind Abraham Lincoln and kills him, blows his head off.
God.
So,
how do they come up with this stuff, dude?
I don't know. But it's almost the same thing, though. It's just like, well, why not sanction him? It's like, you're right. Why don't we just sanction him? Now he's got to follow our rules. I love it, dude. It's just so, it's so simple. It was so overlooked by everyone. It was such a simple answer. It was just too easy to be overlooked. And they're like, we're all overlooking the obvious, easiest answer. And Gruntless is like, well, that sounds like a good plan to me. That's got to play by the rules. Mm-hmm. But, oh, you're right. You're right.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, Itkovian re-sanctioning the Grey Swords to follow Fanderay and Tog and assigning new leadership with the help of the 3 elder women in the Barghast camp.
That was really cool. But I'm just curious to see what's going to happen to Itkovian because he himself has got no god that he is attached to. That he has an empty role, but his role is still active. I guess it's the only way. I don't know how to put it in any other words. He's actively the mortal's. What is he? The Destria?
He's the shield anvil of Fainor.
So he's still the shield anvil of Fainor, who is no longer present. What's that like? What's going on there?
It's almost like being the CEO of a company that's gone out of business.
Right? Yeah, you're right. It's very similar to that, isn't it?
I don't know. Something else is going on with him. It's almost like with his actions, he's becoming more.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what powers he has retained because remember when he did the Reeve, there was power there because his sword was smoking, the hands disappeared. he has some powers. If he's not getting them from Fener, they must be involved in the title. And so they're built into him now at this point. I don't know.
Yeah, it's something. He's got something. I'm just always curious about that. He's very enigmatic.
It's an interesting transition for sure.
Yeah.
All right, great job tonight, Billy.
Hey, great episode, man. Really, really, really great episode.
You got any final thoughts before we drop off here?
Yeah, besides being a great episode, just what an intense chapter, man. Some of my most core memories of the whole series live in this chapter, namely Quickben's encounter with the necromancers, Corval Broach and Bauchelane. And I enjoyed catching my breath a little there. And this is kind of like a rinsing our palate and setting everything back. Now we get ready for the big march as we get ready to start marching for the big push. It's a palate cleanser, but it was also had lots of action in it at the same time. That's great.
Yeah, agreed. All right, thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
We'll see y'all next week.
We thank you all for joining us today.
Again, we really like to thank you for taking the time to be with us, and we've had a really great time talking about the topic today.
If you would like to support our show, you can find us at HorseFrogProductions.com, where you can find our Patreon link. Depending on the platform you're listening from, it may also be in the episode description.
And if you'd like to contact us through email, it's at contact@horsefrogproductions.com.